Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd find myself here. My name's Mike, and I'm 39. For over a decade, I've been married to my wife, Lisa, and together we have two beautiful kids. Up until recently, I thought we had a pretty solid marriage. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but who doesn't, right? I was convinced that what we had was real, that we were one of those couples who would grow old together. But life has a way of blindsiding you when you least expect it. Lisa and I met in college. She was that kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking in. She was fun, confident, the life of every party, and I was the quieter type who found her energy captivating. For years, I thought we balanced each other out perfectly. But now, looking back, I can see that her need for excitement and attention was maybe more than just a personality trait. It was a craving. It all started to shift about 6 months ago. Lisa became obsessed with her appearance in a way I hadn't seen before. She joined a gym, got a new wardrobe, and was always talking about her self-improvement journey. At first, I was happy for her. I thought she just wanted to feel good about herself. But she started going out more, having girls' nights that seemed to last later and later. She'd come back home with a smug smile on her face, brushing off my questions with, "Oh, don't worry, you wouldn't get it." I noticed her phone became her new best friend, too. She'd guard it with her life, taking it to the bathroom, keeping it face down on the table, and texting constantly. Anytime I asked her about it, she'd snap, calling me paranoid and insecure, telling me I needed to loosen up. I brushed it off at first, convincing myself that I was just being overprotective. I trusted her, after all. But as the months went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I tried to ignore the doubts gnawing at me, thinking I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew our marriage was headed down a dangerous road. Little did I know, I was about to uncover a betrayal that would change everything. The turning point came one Friday night. Lisa told me she was going out with her friends again. She'd been spending almost every weekend out with the girls, and every time, she'd come home later than the last, looking a little too pleased with herself. That night, as she left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I tried to distract myself, watching TV, but my mind kept drifting back to her. Finally, around midnight, I decided to check her social media, something I'd never done before. Lisa was usually very active online, but her recent posts had been carefully curated, full of selfies and vague inspirational quotes about living her best life. Something about it seemed fake, almost like she was putting on a show. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to check her friends' profiles to see if they'd posted anything from that night. But as I went through their pages, I noticed something odd. None of them had posted anything about a girls' night out. In fact, one of her friends had posted a picture of herself having dinner at home, alone. My stomach twisted with suspicion, but I needed more proof. I felt like a fool, but I opened her laptop. We had shared passwords for years. I clicked on her email, and that's when I found it. Messages between her and a guy named Jason. Their conversation was full of flirtation, inside jokes, and plans to meet up. My heart pounded as I scrolled further down, my hands shaking. They'd been talking for months, arranging dates that lined up with every one of her so-called girls' nights. The messages were explicit, filled with things she'd never said to me, things I never thought she'd say to anyone else. She talked about how alive he made her feel, how much she craved the excitement he brought into her life. I sat there, numb, staring at the screen, feeling like my entire world had just been shattered. Just then, I heard the front door open. Lisa was back, and I knew I couldn't pretend everything was normal. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and prepared myself for a confrontation that would change everything. Lisa walked in, wearing that same smug smile, like she'd had the time of her life. She tossed her purse onto the counter, barely glancing my way. "Hey," she said, almost dismissively, as if I was an afterthought. "What are you still doing up?" I looked at her, my heart pounding with anger, betrayal, and a trace of sadness. "We need to talk, Lisa." She raised an eyebrow, clearly annoyed. "About what?" "It's late, Mike. Can't this wait until morning?" No, I replied, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. I know about Jason. For a split second, I saw panic flash across her face, but she quickly covered it up, putting on that defiant look she'd perfected. Jason? Who the hell is Jason? Don't play dumb with me, Lisa, I said, clenching my fists to keep myself calm. I saw the messages. I know everything. Her face went pale, but she tried to laugh it off. Oh, come on, Mike. Don't be ridiculous. You're overreacting. Overreacting? I echoed, feeling the anger surge inside me. I read everything. The dates, the places you met, the things you said to him. I know you've been lying to me for months. Lisa's demeanor shifted instantly. She dropped the act, her face twisting with anger and irritation. So, what? You're spying on me now? Going through my things? That's pretty pathetic, Mike. Pathetic? I shot back, unable to believe what I was hearing. You've been sneaking around behind my back, lying to my face every chance you got, and I'm the pathetic one? She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms defiantly. Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't have had to find excitement elsewhere. You've turned into this dull, predictable guy, Mike. I deserve more than that. Her words stung, each one hitting me like a slap to the face. I stood there, stunned by her audacity, by the sheer lack of remorse in her voice. So, this is my fault then? I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. You think just because I work hard to provide for this family, to give you and the kids a good life, that gives you the right to throw it all away? Lisa scoffed, shaking her head. You're so dramatic, Mike. You've been so wrapped up in your own little world. You didn't even notice that I was unhappy. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, this wouldn't have happened. Her words cut deep, but I knew there was no point in arguing with her. She wasn't going to apologize or admit she was wrong. In her eyes, she was the victim here. And in that moment, I realized that I had to do something I never thought I'd have to do. I couldn't keep letting her walk all over me. After our confrontation, I spent the next few days in a fog, trying to come to terms with everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the complete lack of remorse. It all weighed on me, making it impossible to think about anything else. Lisa went about her life as if nothing had happened, barely acknowledging me unless it was absolutely necessary. It was like I didn't even exist to her anymore, like she'd already written me off. But I knew I couldn't let this go. I needed closure, something that would finally put an end to this nightmare and let me regain some semblance of control over my life. That's when the idea came to me, an idea that would give her a taste of the humiliation and pain she'd put me through. Lisa's birthday was coming up, and she'd been planning a big party, inviting all our friends and family. She'd been looking forward to it for weeks, talking about the guest list, the decorations, the surprise she hoped I'd planned for her. I realized this could be the perfect moment to show her the consequences of her actions, to make her face the truth in front of everyone. I spent the next few days preparing. I printed copies of the messages between her and Jason, selecting the most explicit and revealing ones. I put them on large posters, each one capturing the essence of her betrayal. I also called my lawyer and had him prepare divorce papers, neatly framing them so they'd make a fitting gift. On the day of her party, I made sure everything was set. The decorations, the food, the music. It was all just as she'd wanted. I knew she'd be in a great mood, expecting a night of admiration and fun, surrounded by everyone she deceived. She was glowing when she walked into the party, basking in the attention, unaware of what was about to happen. As the guests settled in, I cleared my throat and asked for everyone's attention. Lisa looked at me, slightly surprised but clearly expecting some grand, romantic gesture. I took a deep breath, holding back my emotions, and began. Thank you all for coming here to celebrate Lisa's birthday, I started, forcing a smile. She deserves a night she'll never forget, and I wanted to give her something special, something that truly represents what our marriage has meant over the past few months. I could see confusion beginning to spread across her face, but I pressed on. I want everyone to see the kind of wife Lisa has been, I continued, gesturing to the wall where I'd hung the posters of her messages with Jason. Gasps filled the room as everyone turned to see the evidence of her betrayal, printed in full view for all to see. Lisa's face went pale as she realized what was happening, her mouth opening in shock. And before she could say a word, I handed her the framed divorce papers. "Happy birthday, Lisa," I said coldly. "I think you'll be needing these." The room fell silent, every eye on her, and for the first time, I saw her confidence crumble. She tried to speak, but no words came out, her face a mixture of horror and shame. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions alone. After walking out of the party, I took a long, deep breath, finally feeling a sense of relief wash over me. The weight I had been carrying for months, the betrayal, the pain, the anger, was suddenly lighter. I didn't regret a single thing. Lisa had needed to face the truth, to feel the same humiliation she had inflicted on me, and now everyone knew who she truly was. I went back to my temporary apartment that night, knowing that I couldn't go back to our shared home, at least not yet. My phone buzzed constantly, messages from friends, family, and even some of Lisa's friends who had been at the party. Some were shocked, some supportive, and others were just stunned. I ignored most of them, not ready to dive back into the chaos I'd unleashed. The next morning, I finally gathered the strength to go through the messages. My best friend, Jake, sent me a text filled with disbelief and support, telling me that he had never seen Lisa's betrayal coming and was proud of me for standing up for myself. A few of Lisa's friends, the ones who had always thought she was perfect, sent me angry texts, accusing me of ruining her life. They didn't know the full story, and I didn't bother trying to explain it to them. The one message I dreaded, though, finally came in around noon. It was from Lisa. "How could you do this to me?" she wrote, her anger clear even through the screen. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. Do you know how much that hurt?" I felt a wave of bitter amusement. How much it hurt, as if her actions hadn't ripped my heart out months ago. I took a moment, collected my thoughts, and replied, "I did what I had to do, Lisa. I wanted you to feel a fraction of the pain you put me through. Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to be betrayed." She didn't respond, and I didn't expect her to. I knew she would probably spin this situation to make herself the victim, to make it seem like I was the one who had wronged her. But I didn't care. The people who mattered knew the truth, and that was enough for me. Over the next few days, I found out that the fallout from the party had been significant. Word spread quickly among our mutual friends, and Lisa's reputation took a major hit. She tried to explain it away, to make it sound like I had overreacted, but the evidence on those posters spoke for itself. Some people sided with her, of course, but others, the ones who knew me well, reached out with support. My kids, thankfully, were shielded from the worst of it. I'd arranged for them to stay with my sister that night, not wanting them anywhere near the drama. I knew they would eventually have questions, but I was determined to handle that conversation with care, making sure they understood that none of this was their fault. Lisa's attempts to repair her image were futile, and the life she'd built on lies was crumbling. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my life again, finally able to move forward without the weight of her betrayal holding me back. The weeks following the party were a whirlwind. I had officially filed for divorce, and my lawyer was handling most of the communications with Lisa's legal team. I barely spoke to her, keeping things strictly about the kids. She had tried reaching out a few times, but I'd learned my lesson. I knew her words were just another manipulation tactic, a last-ditch attempt to somehow spin the narrative to make herself look like the victim. One day, she called me, not to beg or apologize, but to demand a larger share of our assets. "You humiliated me, Mike," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "The least you could do is let me keep the house and some extra money. You owe me that much." I laughed, genuinely shocked at her audacity. "Owe you?" I replied, struggling to keep calm. "After everything you did, you think I owe you something?" She scoffed. "You made this mess public. You could have kept it between us, but you wanted to be petty." Petty? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Lisa, you lied to me," cheated on me, and humiliated me over and over again. This is on you. You chose this." She let out an angry huff and hung up. I sat there, the remnants of our conversation lingering in my mind, but I was unfazed. Her words no longer held any power over me. This was just another tactic to maintain control, a control she no longer had. Despite her desperate attempts to cling to the house and assets, the evidence I'd collected ensured that things would likely work in my favor. My lawyer assured me that with everything we had documented, I'd end up with primary custody of the kids, as well as a fair division of our assets. In the midst of all this, I found solace in my friends and family. They had rallied around me, offering support and reminding me that I wasn't alone. The anger and pain were still there, but each day, I felt them less and less. I was finally beginning to feel free, no longer trapped in the cycle of betrayal and lies that had defined my marriage. One evening, while I was picking up my kids from my sister's place, my daughter asked, "Dad, why aren't you and Mom together anymore?" Her innocent eyes searched mine for answers, and my heart ached. I knelt down to her level and chose my words carefully. "Sometimes, adults make choices that hurt each other, sweetie. Your mom and I both want you to be happy, but we realized we're better parents if we're not together. But remember, none of this is your fault, and we both love you very much." She nodded, accepting my answer, and hugged me tightly. At that moment, I realized that no matter what had happened with Lisa, my children were my purpose, my reason for moving forward. As I drove home with my kids in the back seat, I felt a newfound sense of clarity. This was my second chance, a chance to build a life of honesty, respect, and unconditional love. I'd lost a lot in my marriage, but I hadn't lost myself, and now I was finally free to rebuild. With the divorce proceedings underway and the emotional storm beginning to settle, I finally felt like I could start piecing my life back together. The anger and heartbreak still lingered, but each day, I focused more on myself and my children, creating a new normal that was ours alone. My kids were my top priority, and I made sure they felt secure and loved, even as our family structure changed. I decided to make some changes at home, beginning with redecorating. I wanted to remove any remnants of the life I'd shared with Lisa. I repainted the walls, changed the furniture arrangement, and made the space feel like my own. It was a small, symbolic step, but each brushstroke and piece of new furniture felt like shedding a layer of the past. My friends and family were a tremendous support, pulling me out of the house when I felt like brooding and encouraging me to try new things. Jake, my best friend since high school, convinced me to join a weekend hiking group. At first, I was hesitant, but I quickly realized how much I enjoyed the escape and the fresh air. It reminded me that there was a whole world out there beyond the walls of my home and the boundaries of my marriage. I also started going to the gym and getting into better shape. It was partly for my health, but it also helped channel my frustration and anger. I set new goals for myself, physically and mentally, and every bit of progress felt like a step toward healing. Meanwhile, Lisa's life wasn't going as smoothly. Mutual friends told me that her social circle had mostly distanced themselves after learning the truth about her affair. She tried to spin the story to paint herself as a victim, but the proof from the party was irrefutable. Word spread fast, and it turned out people weren't as sympathetic to her situation as she had hoped. The facade she had so carefully crafted was falling apart, and I could see the impact on her when she'd come to pick up the kids. She looked tired, frazzled, and somehow smaller, as though the weight of her own actions was finally bearing down on her. There was no more smugness, no more self-righteous attitude. It was strange. I didn't feel satisfaction in seeing her like that. Instead, I felt indifferent. She was facing the consequences of her own choices, just as I had faced the pain she'd caused me. It wasn't revenge. It was reality. But even as I rebuilt my life, I knew I had to keep things civil with her for the kids' sake. I refused to let bitterness affect my role as their father. We kept conversations brief, focusing only on logistics and the children's schedules. Each time we spoke, I reminded myself that I was doing this for my kids, to give them a healthy environment despite the turmoil we'd been through. As the months passed, I found myself smiling more, laughing with my children, and genuinely feeling lighter. The dark cloud of betrayal was slowly dissipating, replaced by a newfound resilience and determination to build a better future. I had been knocked down, but I wasn't broken, and I was finally beginning to see that I didn't need Lisa's betrayal to define me. This was my life, my chance to start over, and I was ready to take it. Months had passed, and I had finally begun to feel at peace with the life I was creating for myself and my kids. Lisa had faded into the background, a part of my life that I had moved on from, at least as much as someone could after a betrayal that deep. I had thought that chapter was closed, but then, one evening, she showed up at my door, unannounced. I opened the door, surprised to see her standing there. She looked different, not the confident, self-assured woman I once knew. Her face was lined with exhaustion, and her eyes held something I hadn't seen before: regret. "Mike, can we talk?" she asked, her voice softer than I remembered. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, to tell her that whatever she had to say didn't matter anymore. But for the sake of closure, and maybe for my own healing, I stepped aside and let her in. We sat in the living room, the silence between us heavy with memories, both good and bad. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," she started, her voice trembling, "but I needed to tell you that I'm sorry. For everything." I didn't respond, simply watching her, waiting for her to continue. I thought I could have it all," she confessed, looking down at her hands. "I thought I could keep the excitement, the thrill, without losing you. But I was selfish. I hurt you, and I hurt our family, and I know I can't take it back." Hearing her say those words stirred something in me. For so long, I had craved an apology, some acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. But now, sitting here, I realized that her apology, though genuine, didn't hold the power I once thought it would. I didn't need it anymore. I had already started healing on my own, without her words or her regret. "Why now, Lisa?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Why apologize now, after everything?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Because I lost everything. I lost my friends, my reputation, and most importantly, I lost you and the kids. I thought I was invincible, that nothing I did would come back to haunt me. But I was wrong. And now I just want you to know that I regret everything." There was a time when hearing her say that would have filled me with satisfaction. But in that moment, all I felt was a sense of closure, a quiet acceptance that we were done and that her actions had shaped me into a stronger person. "Thank you for saying that," I finally replied, my voice calm. "But I'm moving forward. This apology doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't undo the pain. I'm focused on building a better life for myself and the kids." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes, but she didn't try to argue. She simply stood up, gave me one last look, and left. As the door closed behind her, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The apology was something I hadn't needed anymore, but it was a final piece of closure. As I sat there alone, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about me, and I was finally ready to let go. After that evening, something in me shifted. Lisa's apology, as unexpected as it was, had given me the final sense of closure I didn't know I needed. I hadn't forgiven her for her sake, but for my own. Letting go of the anger, the resentment, and the hurt had allowed me to reclaim a part of myself that had been buried under months of betrayal and pain. Now, I could focus completely on the life I wanted to build for myself and my children. With each passing day, I grew more comfortable with my new reality. I continued my routine of spending quality time with the kids, nurturing them, and creating a home filled with love and support. We went on weekend outings, from hiking trips to museum visits. Our bond grew stronger, untainted by the bitterness of the past. I'd also continued with the changes I'd made for myself. My friends had encouraged me to pursue hobbies I'd left on the back burner, so I enrolled in a cooking class I'd always been interested in. It was both therapeutic and exciting, a reminder that there were parts of me yet to be explored, interests and passions that I'd once set aside. Each time I walked into that class, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that there was life beyond marriage and betrayal. My friends, especially Jake, had been a huge support. He'd always been there, keeping me grounded, offering advice, and dragging me out of the house when I needed it. One evening, as we were having a beer together, he looked at me with a grin. "You know, Mike, I haven't seen you this happy in years. It's like you're finally back to being yourself." I smiled, realizing that he was right. I was no longer haunted by the past, no longer dwelling on the what-ifs. I had finally stepped out from under the shadow of betrayal and was learning to embrace the person I was becoming. The life I was building now felt genuine, filled with self-discovery and resilience. As for my relationship with Lisa, we managed to find a way to co-parent civilly. Our interactions were limited to what was necessary for the kids, and they remained our sole focus. The bitterness had faded, replaced by a respectful distance that allowed us both to focus on our respective lives. She understood now that I was truly moving on, and she respected that. One day, as I was watching my kids play in the park, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life hadn't gone as planned, but it had led me to this moment, a place of peace, strength, and purpose. I was no longer defined by what had happened. Instead, I was defined by how I had grown through it. To anyone reading this who's been through something similar, here's my advice. Let go of what holds you back, and don't be afraid to rediscover who you are. Sometimes, the darkest moments lead to the brightest new beginnings. And for me, this new chapter was the one I was truly meant to live. In the months that followed, my life truly began to feel like my own. I was free from the weight of betrayal, from the anger, and from the pain that had once consumed me. Now, every day was an opportunity to build a life that was filled with purpose, joy, and authenticity. One of the most surprising parts of this journey was discovering how much stronger I'd become. I had faced one of the hardest challenges of my life and come out on the other side not just intact but thriving. I had regained my sense of self-worth, the ability to trust in my own resilience, and, most importantly, the clarity to focus on what truly mattered: my kids and our future together. My relationship with my children blossomed in ways I hadn't expected. They were my source of inspiration, my reason to push forward every day, and my constant reminder of the love that still existed in my life. Each moment spent with them reminded me that I was doing this for them as much as for myself, creating a stable, supportive, and happy home. Lisa's role in my life was now purely as a co-parent. We had managed to create a respectful distance, and our interactions were limited to what was necessary for the kids. The lingering resentment had faded, replaced by a quiet indifference. I no longer felt the need to dwell on the past. I had closed that chapter and was focused solely on what lay ahead. As I looked back on everything I'd been through, I realized just how much I'd grown. Life had thrown me a devastating blow, yet I had rebuilt from the rubble and created a life I was proud of. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing what had happened. It was about freeing myself from the hold the past had over me. If I could give advice to anyone going through a similar situation, it would be this: don't let someone else's actions define your life. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Take the time to heal, rediscover yourself, and remember that you are worthy of love, respect, and happiness. Life may not always go as planned, but sometimes the path we're forced onto is the one that leads us to the life we truly deserve. Today, I stand here as a stronger, wiser man. My past no longer defines me. It has become a part of my story, but it is not the ending. My children, my renewed sense of purpose, and my commitment to myself are what guide me now. I am ready for whatever lies ahead, confident that I have the strength to face it, no matter what. As I close this chapter, I do so with peace, gratitude, and a renewed belief in the future. Life, I've learned, is all about resilience, and I am finally ready to embrace it, one day at a time.